Chapter 2. What the first little mouse had seen and heard on her travels.
When I went out into the wild world,
The little mouse said,
I thought, as many others do when they are my age, that I knew everything. But such was not the case. It takes days and years to know everything. I immediately set out to sea. I went on a northbound ship, for I heard that ship's cooks must know how to manage. But it isn't so hard to manage at sea when you have an abundance of bacon and whole barrels of salt meat and mouldy flour. You live like a lord, but you don't learn how to make soup from a sausage peg. We sailed many days and we sailed many nights. The boat rolled dreadfully and we got many a drenching. When we reached port at last, I left the ship. That was far up in the North Country. It's a strange thing to leave one's chimney corner, sail away in a ship, which is sort of a corner too, and then suddenly find oneself in a foreign land, hundreds of miles away. There were vast and trackless forests of birch and pine. They smelled so strong that I didn't like it. The fragrance of the wild herbs was so spiced that it made me sneeze and think of sausages. There, too, were broad lakes of water which were perfectly clear when you came close to it, though from a distance it looked as black as ink. White swans rested on the lake, and they were so still that at first I thought they were flecks of foam. But when I saw them fly and I saw them walk, I knew at once they were members of the duck family. I could tell by the way they waddled. One can't disown his relatives. I kept to my own kind. I went with the field and the forest mice, although they knew little enough of anything, and nothing at all of cookery, which was the very thing I had travelled so far to find out about. That it was possible to think that soup could be made from a sausage peg startled them so that the information was immediately banded through the vast forest. But that there could be any solution to such a problem they thought was utterly impossible. And little did I expect there, before the night was over, I should be initiated into the making of it. It was midsummer. The mice said that this was why the woods and the herbs were so redolent. The water so clear and yet so dark blue in contrast with the whiteness of the swans. At the edge of the forest, between 3 or 4 houses, they had raised a pole as high as a ship's mainmast. Garlands and ribbons fluttered from the peak of it. It was a maypole. Young men and maidens danced around it and sang at the top of their voices, while the fiddler played them a tune. They were merry in the sunset and merry in the moonlight. But I had no part in it, for what would a little mouse be doing in a forest dance? So I sat on the soft moss and held tight to my sausage peg. The moonlight fell particularly bright on one spot, where there was a tree. The spot was carpeted with moss so soft that I dare say it was as fine as the Mouse King's fur. But its colour was green, and it was a blessing to the eyes. All of a sudden there appeared a few of the most enchanting little folk, no taller than my knee. They resembled human beings, except that they were better proportioned. Elves was what they called themselves. They went dressed very fine in clothes made of flower petals trimmed with wings of flies and gnats. It wasn't all bad looking. They seemed in search of something, but I don't know what it could be until a couple of them came up to me. Then the leader pointed to my sausage peg and said, "That's just what we need. It's pointed, it's perfect." The more he looked at my sausage peg, the happier it made him. "You can borrow it," I told him, "but not keep it." "Not keep it," all of them promised, as they took the sausage peg that I gave them and danced away with it to the place where the soft moss grew. They wanted to have a maypole of their own, and mine seemed made to order for them. Then they decorated it. Yes, what a sight it was! Small spiders spun gold thread around it. They draped it with streamers and banners so fine and bleached so snowy white in the moonlight that they dazzled my eyes. They took the colour from a butterfly's wing and splashed it about on my sausage peg until it seemed blooming with flowers and sparkling with diamonds. I scarcely knew it, for in all the world there was no such match to the maypole they had made for it. Now the real party of elves appeared in great numbers. Not a stitch did they wear, yet it couldn't have been more refined. I was invited to look on, but from a distance, because I was too big for them. Then the music struck up, and such music! It seemed as if 1,000 bells of glass were ringing. It was so rich and full that I thought it was the swans who were singing. Yes, I even thought I heard the cuckoos and the blackbirds, until it was as if the whole forest had joined the chorus. Children's voices, bell tones, bird songs, all seemed to keep tune in the loveliest melody, yet it came from the elves' maypole. It was a whole chime of bells, yet it was my sausage peg. I would never have imagined so much could have been done with it. But that depends altogether who gets hold of it. I was deeply touched. From sheer pleasure, I wept as much as a little mouse could weep. The night was all too short, but the nights in the far north are not any longer that time of year. As dawn broke, the morning breeze rippled the mirrored surface of the lake. The fine spun streamers and banners were blown away. The billowing garlands of spider-webs, the suspension bridges from leaf to leaf, the balustrades and whatever else they're called, blew away like nothing at all. 6 elves brought back my sausage peg and asked if I wished for anything they could give me. So I begged them to tell me how to make soup from a sausage peg. The chief smiled and he said, "How do we do it?" "Why, you've just seen it. I'm sure you scarcely knew your sausage peg." "To you it's only a trick of speech," I said. I told him honestly what I travelled in search of, and what importance was attached to it here at home. "What good," said I, "does it do our Mouse King, or our great kingdom, for me to witness all this merrymaking? I can't just wave my sausage peg and say, 'See the peg? Here comes the soup.' This sort of dish is good only after the guests at the table have had their fill." Then the chief elf dipped his finger in the blue cup of a violet and told me, "Watch this. I shall anoint your pilgrim staff. When you come home again to the Mouse King's palace, you need only touch his warm heart with it, and the staff will immediately be covered in violets, even in the coldest winter time. So I should say I have given you something to take home with you, and a little more for good measure." Before the little mouse had said what this little more was, she held out her stick to the king's heart. Really and truly, it became covered in the most beautiful bouquet of flowers, and their fragrance was so strong that the Mouse King ordered the mice who stood nearest the fire to singe their tails. He wanted a smell of something burning to overcome the smell of violets, which was not the kind of perfume he liked.
"What was that little more for good measure?" he asked.
"Oh, yes," said the little mouse. "I think it is what they call an effect."
She turned the stick around, and behold, there was not a flower to be seen on the bare sausage peg in her hand. She flourished it like a magic baton.
"Violets are to see and smell and touch," the elf told me, "so something must be done for us to hear and taste."
The little mouse began to beat time, and music was heard. It was not the elfin music of the forest. No, it was such as can be heard in the kitchen. There was the bubbling sound of boiling and stewing. It came all at once, as though the wind rushed through every chimney funnel, and every pot in the kitchen boiled over. The fire shovel clanged upon the copper kettle, and then all at once the sound died down. One heard the whispers of the tea kettle song. so sweet to hear and so low they could scarcely tell when it began or left off. The little pot simmered, and the big pot boiled, and neither kept time with one another. It was as if there were no reason left in the pots, and the little mouse flourished her baton even more fiercely. The pots seethed and bubbled and boiled over. The wind whistled and roared down the chimney. Puffed! It rose so tremendously that the little mouse at length lost hold of her stick.
"That was thick soup,"
said the Mouse King.
"Is it ready to be served?"
That's all there is to it,
the little mouse curtsied.
"All?"
said the Mouse King.
"Then we had better hear what the next one has to tell us."